All right, that's the minister. Let's get in some opinion now. Nitin Soni of Fitch Ratings and Naveen Kulkarni, CIO at Axis Securities, are joining in to take us through what this would mean. Gentlemen, good to have the both of you here. Nitin, I trust you heard what the minister said. Does this, solve the imminent problem that Vodafone Idea is facing in terms of debt repayments, and to what degree? Your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. So we believe that it's a minor relief. It's not a waiver. It's only a deferment of spectrum liabilities and AGR dues for 4 years with additional interest. The situation Vodafone Idea is right now in that the cash generation is insufficient to pay even the interest cost. So this will increase the interest burden, and they don't have enough cash to put money into capex. So what I believe is that they will continue to lose subscriber base, and their market position will continue to weaken because they don't have sufficient money to invest to remain competitive in the market. So overall, minor relief, but it will only defer their payments, but it's not really a lifesaver.
Okay, it's a minor relief, not a lifesaver for Vodafone Idea. Naveen Kulkarni of Axis Capital is also with us on the show now. Naveen, your thoughts on the extent of relief this provides to Vodafone Idea? How would you read it?
Yeah, so one way to look at it is that there is a time frame of close to 4 years for the industry as such to get the overall structure in terms of tariffs, in terms of overall cash flows up from where they are currently, right? So that if that can be improved upon, then there is a business case for Vodafone Idea. Right now, what the government has done is that it has provided relief on cash flows, I think, which to some extent I would say is significant, because there will not, and the period is 4 years, which is significant, right? So, and in between, wherever the business case improves, they can start making the payments also, right? I don't think so government will stop them from making payments at any point in time. So the important factor here is that right now there is a leeway of 4 years, and if Vodafone Idea is able to put its act together, raise some funding, improve its network quality, and manage to hold on to its subscribers and its market share, and also subsequently the industry is able to take the tariffs up, I think there is a business case for Vodafone Idea. So I would say that it's not completely ruled out, but still it's going to be an uphill task for me.
It's circular, isn't it, Naveen? I mean, getting an investor on board would need better overall conditions, industry conditions, and does all that has been announced, does it lead to that? Nitin earlier said, well, in a very minor way, it's not a big game changer. Mr. S.P. Kochhar, Director General at the Cellular Operator Association of India, is joining us, the COAI, the industry body. Mr. Kochhar, great to have you here. Thanks very much. Nitin Soni of Fitch Ratings, who we were speaking with earlier, called what's been announced minor relief, not a lifesaver. Would you agree, or would you think about this differently?
Well, on the face of it, it's a good step that the government has taken. And it is an indicator of the thinking, the change thinking in the government circles. If you notice, the first reading shows that all the steps that have been announced are prospective in nature and will not give too much of immediate relief. So to that extent, I agree with what Mr. Punya says. And but it also gives an indicator that maybe for the 5G, government is aware, and at that point of time they will announce greenfield steps, which will help us roll out 5G in a more cost-effective manner with better procedures, with better costs.
Mr. Kochhar, afternoon. So, given the cash flow relief, it's possible that Vodafone Idea survives. But will it survive as a strong competitive entity? So, for instance, will it have the muscle to make the required investments, the capex, similar to its competitors, participate in the upcoming auction, spend in a big way and acquire 5G spectrum? Or will it just, continue to stay on, linger on as the weak third player in the market?
It's at this point difficult to say how much relief they will get unless we analyze the full report. We haven't even seen the full report. So we'll wait for specific comments only after we analyze the report. It would be premature for us to say anything on this, and especially when we're talking of a particular entity, may not be correct to make any comments unless the entire report is analyzed in detail.
Right. Mr. Kochar, we had Naveen Kulkarni, analyst who covers the companies in the sector, saying that, if Vodafone Idea could get its act together, get an investor on board, it's got a moratorium period on its hands now, it can use that. What are your thoughts? I mean, do you think that is likely? You're very well aware of the condition as far as companies in the sector are. There aren't that many left now. What's your sense? Is it possible, given what has been announced today?
Our stance has always been that we would like Vodafone to continue. We are not in favor of a duopoly, and definitely Vodafone should continue. And this is a step. It may be a baby step, but this is a step in that direction, definitely.
So when you spoke about 5G, you spoke about greenfield operators perhaps coming into the fray this time around. Could you elaborate more on what you expect?
I didn't say greenfield operators. I said the pricing and the procedures would be greenfield at that point of time. And since there will be no legacy for the government to follow, it will be easier for them to modify it as per the requirements of the industry, of the environment. Yeah, so taking an administrative decision on that score will be much more easier. And that is what I'm calling greenfield rather than brownfield.
Naveen, just to come back to you, to that point, to just press that point about a potential investor and all of that. I mean, I mentioned earlier it is circular, right? I mean, any investor would want to see supportive regulations. There is some forbearance which has been announced now. Will that be enough? Any thoughts? Or you think, I mean, it's going to be hard, even after what has been done today, for that kind of a scenario to play out for Vodafone Idea?
See, on the face of it, at this point in time, it looks a little challenging. But see, at the end of the day, the period of moratorium is 4 years, which is not a short period. It's a fairly long period. Telecom as an industry is a fairly large industry with huge scope for revenues, huge amount of cash flows. And even if a player continues to have a 25% market share, which can be substantial in the long run. So my limited point here is that the moratorium period is not as short as we think it is. It's a fairly a long period, and that period might be just sufficient for the company to do something about it, right? So that's where my limited point is. Second point, of course, is I think the government seems to be quite serious about having a good amount of competition in the industry. So I think that's also very, very critical. So the intentions of the government are to have a good number of players in the industry, and a player like Vodafone Idea were to survive, I think is going to be in the interest of the government, seems to be very, very clear. So I think I would say that there seems to be a good amount of chance that Vodafone Idea could be an ongoing entity in the medium to long term, as we can see it now.
Okay, so 4 years is a long time for the company to resurrect itself and get back perhaps to its former glory. So Naveen, from a stock market point of view, what is the best way to approach this? Now, Vodafone Idea is beaten down. Any bounce can be quite meaningful. Would you recommend investors look at Vodafone Idea and play the relief over the next 4 years? Or do you think Bharti is still the preferred bet?
Yeah, so one thing which is very, very clear is that the industry's overall cash flow situation should improve. So from that perspective, if tariffs were to go up, then the leading players will benefit the most because their cash flows will improve significantly. Vodafone Idea, the challenge will be to the extent of what value can be made for the equity holders, right? So that's a difficult question to answer. Even if the company were to continue to survive for 4 years, what kind of value accretion can happen to the equity investors is a difficult question, because there could be dilution and at what rate and so on and so forth. Those are the difficult questions to answer. But Bharti is a much more straightforward bet, because that's what we can see right now. Tariff hikes seem to be more likely than ever, and most likely being one of the strongest players with having the best ARPU profile seems to be an easier bet to take. Vodafone, I would say that will be a slightly challenging bet to make at this point in time.
Fair enough. Mr. Kochar, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for speaking with us with those first takes. Naveen and Nitin, stay with us. Let me also bring in Piyush Vaish, partner and telecom sector leader at Deloitte India. Piyush, good to have you here. Thank you very much. Your first thoughts on the announcements which have come from the cabinet today as far as the telecom sector goes. 4-year moratorium on telecom dues starting the 1st of October if companies want it. What does it do for Vodafone Idea in your opinion? Piyush.
I think the government has taken quite a few bold initiatives today. Clearly, I think absolutely hands down to the government for bringing in probably a lot of initiatives today. I think 4 years is a fairly long period for the moratorium, and I think this clearly paves the way for a good auction happening for 5G. I think the government, or I think the Honorable Minister was also very clear in mentioning that we can expect auctions happening in the last quarter, because he talked about the timetable. So I think that also gives a message that we are clearly on the way to bringing in 5G into India. So I think that's another piece. And I think a lot of simplification being carried out, whether it was at the consumer side from a KYC perspective, whether it was the towers, etc. I think it looks like the government is really committed to make sure that we have a far more smoother process. Obviously, there's nothing that can be done for the retrospective thing, but clearly prospective, I think the government is absolutely committed to really get this industry really moving at a much faster and a smoother pace.
Piyush, afternoon. Rima here. The Vodafone Idea was struggling to raise that 25,000 crore of fundraise for the last 1 year. Do you think now it will be possible for the company to raise that? Do you see investors committing their money?
I think the government has clearly talked about it, that the government is very, very bullish on a healthy competition in the sector. And I think in one of the questions that the minister was answering, he clearly referred to that they're looking at a healthy competition. So I think I'm very bullish on all the operators in this market, that they will survive, and we will see a very, very strong outlay happening on the 5G side and for the next few years.
Piyush, specifically for Vodafone Idea, can you comment? What does this do? This set of announcements, not the sector, but for the company.
I think for each of these companies here, if you look at it, now they get a moratorium of 4 years. So I think there's a last cash that was really needed to get paid out. I think that gets deferred, while obviously there is an interest cost at MCLR plus 2%, which is rightly so, because the government also needs to protect its revenues. But I think at the same time, that abundant cash availability will help them grow in the marketplace, whether it's in terms of rolling out the infrastructure, whether it's really rolling down, preparing themselves for the 5G auctions. So I think these were really the things that were probably hindering some of these companies, and clearly I think now they have a way out, come out of this entire time.
Piyush, stay on. Ankit Jain, the Assistant Vice President and Sector Head of Corporate Ratings at ICRA, is also with us. Ankit, afternoon. Your thoughts on the relief which has been provided today? Do you have a rating on Vodafone Idea? What was it? Does it change?
So we didn't have any rating on Vodafone Idea, but this is definitely a welcome move, a big relief for the sector as a whole. So we expect that moratorium on AGR dues will give a breather of around 14,000 crores for the industry. And on the spectrum dues, it will be somewhere around 32,000 crores of cash flow relief. So, and plus a period of 4 years, it gives time to the industry to do the fundamental changes, increase tariffs, and organically deleverage their balance sheets. So this is much needed for the industry at this point in time, especially given the fact that the earlier moratorium was ending in FY22 and the spectrum payments were due in next fiscal. So this comes as a big relief at the right point in time. The other measures are also welcoming. I mean, especially the rationalization of the definition of AGR, production in SUC, dues on the spectrum sharing. A calendar on spectrum auctions, I thought, is a very good move. It gives way for the telecom operators to plan for the purchases, and also the elongation of spectrum auctions allocation for a period of 30 years. So all in all, a very good package at a very good point in time.
You're saying the spectrum dues relief would be 32,000 crore. Naveen, would you help us with the math for Vodafone Idea? What is the extent of their annual AGR dues as well as their spectrum dues? And therefore, on an annual basis, how much cash flow will they be able to save?
Yeah, so that number, I think, looks substantial. So I think the AGR dues could be in the range of around 8,000 crores and spectrum dues are in the range of around 16,000 crores. So annual savings will be in that range of around 24,000 crores, right? So that's the kind of saving that we could be looking at for the next 2 to 3 years. So that is a significant number. Of course, the balance sheet will still reflect the dues and will still reflect the indebtedness. But from a cash flow point of view, I think they have more options, right, to manage their P&L. They have more options to invest in the business, right? So all those things are now going to be the key factors.
Nitin, so what happens to tariffs now? I mean, what are the implications? If, for example, because of what has been done, you said, well, it's minor help, but it does help. And Voda Idea, I mean, it's not it doesn't go, the sector doesn't go to becoming a duopoly, but there is Vodafone Idea and other players as well. Do tariffs start to move higher, or it's still going to be, waiting for the other guy to start increasing tariffs? So there's no visibility when that will happen. Yeah.
No, we do believe that a tariff hike is needed. Bharti's chairman have been saying publicly that industry needs a tariff for 200 rupees in the medium term and 300 rupees in the longer term. So clearly there is an acknowledgement of the fact by at least Bharti and Vodafone Idea that tariff needs to improve. I think there has been a delay in tariff increase because of COVID and because of the rapid subscriber loss at Vodafone Idea. But given this relief, now we believe that it gives a window to Vodafone Idea to do a tariff headline increase. Bharti has tinkered with tariff increases by increasing the minimum amount a prepaid user needs to pay to 79 rupees. But I think more is needed, and we do believe that in the next 12 to 18 months, the tariff can actually improve anywhere at least by 15 to 20%. But it's a difficult decision for Vodafone Idea. If they do increase tariff, then there is also a risk of further subscriber losses for Vodafone Idea.
Naveen, Nitin, Piyush, as well as Ankit, thank you very much for joining us on this big story that we're tracking today, where a telecom relief package has been cleared by the cabinet. The experts we've spoken to have said this is a welcome step. It indicates the government's commitment to have healthy, vibrant competition and ensure all the players survive. And for Vodafone Idea, as we've been pointing out, this moratorium of 4 years on all dues will provide cash flow relief, and therefore Vodafone Idea is in much better position than it was to survive. And of course, a lot of measures have been taken prospectively to bring down the burden by changing the definition of AGR, or cutting back on the penalty or the interest on interest that they were earlier charged, as well as simplifying the processes. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on this very important issue. On that note, we'll slip into a very short break.